All right, well, I am going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today for the Iowa Hunger Coalition's annual meeting. Just a little bit about the Iowa Hunger Coalition. We are a membership-based 501c4 organization. We have a volunteer board of directors and no paid staff members. And we use our collective voice to educate and advocate for policies that would eliminate food insecurity and build equitable food systems in our state. I'm sure a lot of you have maybe seen graphics similar to these before, but I wanted to share them just so we kind of have a common understanding going into building our advocacy agenda for the coming year. Around the framework of community or local food systems. And the reason that we wanted to share this is we think that we can't end food insecurity in the state without also addressing some of the issues with our food system and creating a more equitable food system. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this framework, it really seeks to kind of understand how the different aspects of the food system interact, from growing our food to transporting and processing it, and then moving into how we access our food and consume food, and finally food waste and recovery. So I just wanted to share this, get you maybe thinking a little bit about how our food system works and the different pieces we can be looking at as we're determining a policy agenda. But first, we wanted to set the stage and share a little bit about the state of food insecurity in Iowa right now from a couple perspectives. So up first, we're going to be hearing from Kayla Rome with the North Liberty Community Pantry to share the perspective of a food pantry and what that work has been like in the past year. Kayla, do you want to take over?
Yeah, thanks, Luke. So yeah, as Luke mentioned, I run a small food pantry in Johnson County, and I can really only share my perspective of how it's gone, but some things are a little obvious for folks to kind of see. And one is that with the coronavirus pandemic in the last year, there's been a really high unemployment rate. Anytime that there's a really high unemployment rate, there's always going to be high food insecurity. Same thing with anytime there is an economic downturn, there's always going to be high food insecurity. Those things kind of go hand in hand. And for smaller pantries across the state of Iowa that really rely on volunteers only or small church-based pantries, during the COVID pandemic, they saw a huge drop-off in volunteers. And a lot of those pantries really could not cope and were not set up to respond to the level of need that they had been seeing. Linda's not here today with the food bank, but I know food banks really stepped in and sort of filled a lot of shoes of smaller food pantries, where they didn't have the structure set up, they didn't have staff set up to provide for their community at those smaller sites. So I know the food banks have been working really hard to help meet that need, but for the most part, a lot of small pantries had to sort of reinvent how they were doing different services. That increased demand, coupled with an increase in safety measures, so keeping people distance, having to provide PPE, just meant reinventing food pantry services. So a lot of food pantries in our community moved to drive-through services. They created delivery programs. They started mobile pantries, really trying to bring food to the people in need, or creating ways for people to access those services without contributing to the ongoing pandemic. There were some safety nets that increased throughout this last year that for individuals utilizing food pantries were really, really helpful. So SNAP benefits, formerly known as food stamps or EBT benefits, were increased to the maximum. Unemployment benefits, those were also increased for the significant number of people on unemployment. School meals were now provided for free throughout the state, and there were different counties and statewide moratoriums on evictions and utility cutoffs. And all of that stuff really kind of helped those families who are right on the edge, sort of stay free of poverty. So different counties saw different levels of increase and different levels of even decreases for people who are able to utilize some of those services. But as all of those relief programs are starting to expire, and we know that the cost of living is continuing to rise, the cost of goods is continuing to rise, we are all, and the smaller food pantries, really preparing for higher demand in our services. So we're really kind of bracing for what's about to come throughout this year, and trying to learn from what we've done last year, and really working with partners across the state and working with food banks across the state to help meet the demands that we're seeing now.
Great, thank you so much for sharing that perspective, Kayla. Next, we're going to hear from Larry Linenbrink with the Quad Cities Food Rescue Partnership to share a bit about how food rescue programs have been seeing a change. You with us, Larry?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry. I see I had yeah, the Food Rescue Partnership is a little different than food pantries, which provide food. We're actually doing education to the public. And Christina McDonald from our health department, she's a community health consultant. She was kind of ramrodding the Food Rescue Partnership, which she has. She's president of our organization right now. But it began in 2015 with Scott County Health Department and Rock Island County Health Department. And Rock Island County Health Department being Rock Island, Illinois, so it was a Quad Cities venture. You know, our vision was to be community dedicated to eliminating food waste, which is established through our mission of promoting rescuing food for best use. Our Food Rescue Partnership works to provide food education awareness to the community at large and form new partnerships to promote food rescue. One way we were trying to figure out how would we get to all these restaurants, and which provide a lot of food, it probably has food left over or thrown away. We decided that our environmental health specialists in our health departments are inspecting these restaurants anyway. They would be a good person to talk to the managers of the restaurants or food establishments while they're doing their inspections. So they did, and they asked them if they would consider donating food for rescuing food. And one of the great things they always had to ask is, well, I'm worried about liability. What happens if I'm going to get sued if someone gets sick from my food? Well, we assured them that the Good Samaritan law, which is in effect, would keep them harmless of any litigations. So over the past year, we had to change the way we've done presentations. We went usually to the meetings, but this year we went to 13 presentations, which actually were given virtually. So they've had conferences, meetings, and other events. And throughout the year, our RFP stakeholders had to swiftly answer questions about food donations during this pandemic. And together with RFP and local health departments communicated that there was no correlation between food and COVID-19 other than the risk of food being wasted and canceled events or business closures. So I imagine everyone remembers March 17th, 2020. That's when our governor, Reynolds, suspended dine-in services in restaurants and other establishments as a public health strategy to limit the spread of COVID-19. So shortly after this announcement, health departments received an influx of calls from restaurants requiring about donating their freshly prepared food. And through great cooperation, the FRP facilitated more than 4,355 pounds of food being donated in 4 days. So this was quite an accomplishment to save that food. In addition, a local chef recommended that he has the ability to operate a safe community kitchen under the River Center Adler Theater food license so that professional food handlers could volunteer to prepare and serve food that otherwise would be wasted. So one of the our FRP stakeholders we always hosted a biannual event, which we provided training to the restaurants or the general public on awareness of food to food professional establishments and retail stores. But due to the strategies and the spread of COVID-19, we had to brainstorm on how we were going to provide this education since we'd done it in person before. So what we did, we decided to do a webinar, which was our first webinar on virtual webinar in 2020. So our stakeholder decided to do this. So we provided a food rescue workshop in 100% live webinar series, and it was in recording and available to replay. And during the FRP education, the material was at no cost to 100% of participants, and 30 people participated in this event. Our webinar event with series feedback was just overwhelming, and everyone really enjoyed seeing our presentation. And I just have a couple of slides there up there Luke has on, and the one he has on there is one that we worked with Augustana College with the GIS department. The students helped us, but what we did is we mapped areas where there was food insecurity when there was no place which lacking grocery stores or restaurants, not grocery stores or C-stores, which are convenience stores, within 1 mile. I don't know if you can see it, but there's circles there. Within those circles, those people were within a mile from any place to go to a grocery store or a C-store. So if you notice in the dark purple, that's where the highest majority of poverty people live. And you can see that there's not many places there for them to get to a grocery store. So those are pretty much the things that the Food Rescue did this past year to try and rescue food and keep it from the landfills.
Thank you so much for sharing all that information, Larry. And I think you shared some really cool ideas and projects that are going on in the Quad Cities. So next, we are going to provide a quick debrief from the 2021 legislative session. And for that, we are going to hear from the Hunger Coalition's contract lobbyists, John and Cindy Peterson.
There we go. Sorry about that. John and I just left the bill signing for the food bank, so we're still in our car, pulled off to do this little update for you. Governor did sign it. And as you know, we finally got the legislation passed. Senator Robbie Smith in the state government, chair of state government committee, actually took over that bill from Dawson, our Senator Dawson, and got it through full committee, subcommittee, full committee. And then it kind of sat for a little bit, and we were told they're working on it. And what they actually did was pull it in this huge tax reform bill. And Dawson was instrumental in pulling all the bits and pieces around on that tax reform bill. And so what he did was then scooped it in with a whole bunch of other mental health and firefighter tax credits and a lot of different bits and pieces that have to do with tax reform. So she signed that a few minutes ago at the YSS Center here in Ames. And a couple things I wanted to inform you, and I will email this to Luke who can distribute it, but there were a few questions about when it starts, and because there wasn't an enactment date in that language, it will start July 1, take effect July 1, and I got this information directly from Department of Revenue, so I feel really good about that it's the truth. I'm having trouble. Food banks can claim an exemption by completing an exemption certificate and providing it to retailers. We are just now starting our forms review process to incorporate changes from this legislative session. So I will try to add a box on the left-hand column for food banks, but in the meantime, such entities shall check the other box beginning July 1. And I asked specifically for pantries, do they check that same food banks box? And they said yes. So if you're using this form right away on July 1st and you don't see that box, just go ahead and use other on that form. He also said, I would note that the language enacted in Senate File 619 applies to purchases by food banks of tangible personal property and taxable services, but does not include purchases of specified digital products, which is defined in Code Section 423.1. Purchases by food banks of specified digital products will remain taxable. So we need to look up in that code, and I feel like that is computers and stuff like that.
Software.
So then the food banks questioned, they really dug deep into that question and were worried that if you're buying things from a digital platform, if that would make a difference. So you're buying things online. So I asked him that question and he said, I assume Ms. Prather is talking about supplies in terms of things that would be considered tangible personal property, plates, tables, cabinets, etc. Those items continue to be tangible personal property even when purchased online, regardless of the delivery method. So if a food bank orders a supply of light bulbs online from Amazon, Walmart, Sam's, etc., that's a sale of tangible personal property to the food bank, which will be exempt. Whether it gets delivered to the food bank or someone picks it up at the store, it does not impact that. And then there was a question about local sales tax. The exemption applies to sales of tangible personal property and services for both state sales tax 6% and local option sales tax 1% were applicable.
All distributed.
So there is no tax due for those items or services if either state sales tax are lost. I will email that to Luke directly from Department of Revenue, so you all know that. But July 1 is when you can start accepting that exemption. The other big bill was Senate Study Bill 1125. And if you remember correctly, this was Senator Schultz trying to put restrictions on SNAP recipients. The little subcommittee of Schultz, Mathis, and Whiting passed, and it went to the full committee and became Senate File 389. There was a series of amendments filed and they all lost. And I'm pretty sure those were all the Democrats trying to clean that up a little bit. And then it went through the Senate floor and they passed it 30-18, pretty much on party lines. Then it was sent over to the House, and we always had the promise from Representative Ann Meyer that was not going to happen, and she stood firm. And Ann Meyer, Timmy Brown Powers, and Fry never met actually to take that any further. And then the Senate tried to put it in the Human Services bill at the end when they started lobbying everything that didn't get into one big ominous bill. And they put it in there, and when it went over to the House removed it. So we are very thankful, especially to Representative Ann Meyer, who really led that charge. So if you haven't sent her an email and thanked her, that would be a good thing maybe to do, to let them know we're watching the work that they do. So those are the two biggies, and we're pleased the food bank thing finally made it through. It wasn't easy, especially the day that Senator Robbie Smith held a subcommittee on giving dance studios tax credits. My phone was blowing up and I was like on fire up there. And that's when Dawson got mad and threw it over to Robbie Smith and said, you handled it. So anyway, there was a little tenuous moments with that, but I think we proved our passion for why this is important and got it through. So anybody have any questions for John and I? John's here in the passenger seat. So
Yeah, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them out in the chat. Otherwise, thank you so much, Cindy and John, for all your hard work and making great strides, I feel like, this past legislative session. So
Very good.
thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Luke.
Yep. Yeah, maybe we can send out a little sort of explainer on that sales tax exemption and the process that folks will need to go through, just so you all have that information. Next, we're going to hear from Natalie Veldhuis, who's going to provide an update on some of the federal policy changes we've seen over the course of the pandemic and kind of what is maybe next with some of those.
All right. Thanks. Hi, Luke. Hi, everyone. Before I dive into a couple pieces of federal policy, I wanted to thank Cindy and John, but I also wanted to thank all of you and our IHC members. I know we put out a lot of action alerts and blasts asking folks to, reach out to senators and representatives, letting them know, hey, it's important that people have food all the time, and especially during a pandemic. And I know folks were really responsive, and I know people were sending those emails and making those phone calls. So I also just wanted to thank, everyone who took time to do that, or, share stuff on social media. We really appreciate that. So thank you, everyone, for all of your work in, stopping that bad bill that would have kicked 50,000 folks off of SNAP in Iowa, and then also, pushing forward this sales tax exemption for pantries and food banks. So I'm going to pivot and talk about some nerdy federal policy stuff, and basically how SNAP changed and became a bit more flexible during the COVID-19 pandemic. So the US Department of Agriculture made a bunch of waivers available to expand SNAP and make it more responsive to the needs of families during the pandemic. And two specific pieces I'm going to touch on are the emergency allotments that Kayla mentioned earlier, and then also the Pandemic Electronic Benefits Transfer Program, PEBT. So with emergency allotments, they enable households to receive the maximum SNAP allotment for their household size. And what does that mean? So for example, before, for a family of 4, the amount of benefits you would get would depend on income and a few other things. So different families of 4 would be receiving different benefit levels. Now, and during the pandemic, right now in Iowa, families of 4 are all receiving $782 per month in SNAP. So that's a huge change. And that was also boosted 15% in addition to the maximum allotments due to a bill that was passed federally in late 2020. So families are getting a lot more than they were before. And unfortunately, as of right now, emergency allotments are scheduled to end on September 30th in 2021, unless that's extended further. And then the other big change that we saw is the PEBT program, which provides nutritional resources to families who have lost access to free or reduced price lunch, school meals due to either school closures or online learning. And through this program, families receive money on a new or existing EBT card to help fill the school meals gap. So PEBT was administered last school year, and was also approved by Iowa DHS for the current school year. And right now, I am putting a link in the chat to a great FAQ page that the Iowa Department of Education pulled together, just answering 20 different questions about what PEBT is and how it works. So I thought this was really helpful. And so I'm sending that around to everybody. And I also just wanted to note that I know in some communities, some local farmers markets have been able to accept PEBT cards. So if anyone's interested in making that a possibility in your community, reach out to me and I might be able to connect folks with some resources. And my understanding on the PEBT now is that each eligible child will receive $6.82 for each qualified day. And that FAQ page has a lot more information about what that actually means. So that's all that I have right now. But if you have any additional questions about what's going on in the federal landscape with food assistance and how that impacts, how people are receiving the program in Iowa, please feel free to email me or shoot me a chat, and I would love to connect with you. So thanks for being with us. Thanks, Luke.
Thank you so much, Natalie. All right, well, next we are kind of going to move into determining our 2022 legislative advocacy agenda. And we wanted to leave kind of the bulk of the time for this and get everyone's feedback as we determine our policy priorities for the coming legislative session. So how we're going to do this is we've got Zoom breakout rooms set up, and you are going to choose one of these breakout rooms to join. It's kind of organized by different sectors of the food system. So we've got a breakout room for production and growing food, one for processing and distribution, another for access and consumption, and the final room will be focused on food waste and recovery. So I want all of us to be thinking about what are the top policy priorities that the Iowa Hunger Coalition should be pursuing in that specific area. And I imagine there will be some overlap between these. So if you've got a really good idea, but you're not in that specific room, please just share it. We'll be collecting all of these ideas. We'll have facilitators in all the rooms that will be taking notes. So really, you know, this section is just kind of brainstorming and coming together and sharing ideas. So please feel free to share others. So we'll have about 20 minutes of conversation in these breakout rooms, and then we'll be sharing out with the full group. So I am going to stop sharing a second and make sure everyone is unmuted.
Luke, you want to walk through on how we get into the rooms?
Yeah, so I'm going to click here in a second to open the breakout rooms, and you'll just choose the breakout room that you would like to join and click join. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and one of us will be able to help you out. So I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms, and we'll see you all back here in about 20 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had some good discussions in your breakout rooms. And we're going to be kind of sharing out from each of those some of the top policy priorities that the group's identified. So does someone from the production group want to share what you discussed? And you should have the ability to unmute yourself now.
Well, we discussed a lot. Susan had some good ideas, but we discussed, you know, just talking about poverty more and helping to build those connections between local foods and those who are in need. And, you know, talking about also like some of the programs that are already in place that we were just getting into it before we had to cut off, but some of the programs that are already in place that support local food with those in need to be beefed up a little bit more. You know, the double up, there are barriers still to double up food bucks and farmers being able to participate. There are barriers with the nutrition program checks that are distributed by the Department of Ag, where they're distributed but not always spent. In my corner of the state, it's like only 30% of them are redeemed. So there's obviously barriers there. There are things in place to help with local food and those in need, but they're just not functioning correctly. So, and then what was your, Susan, what was your quote about the ambulance?
Oh, yeah, I thought we made Kayla do this, but she came on a little later. Many years ago, and I'll date myself, John Denver used to recite this poem at the beginning of his concerts about the ambulance down in the valley. So the question was all about a village at the top of a cliff, and people kept dying driving off the end of the cliff. And so they had this big debate about whether they should put a fence at the top of the cliff or an ambulance down in the valley. And you know, it's a question of whether you do preventative measures or, you know, or not. So we were talking about poverty is a little bit more like the cliff, you know, the fence at the top of the cliff, or We also, I of course threw in something about setting aside land just to grow food for our communities. Would be like that instead of waiting for everything to go to corn and soybeans and everything being exported. And then we have to figure out how to get it to people or deal with their obesity. We didn't talk about it specifically, but that was the general metaphor, was can we put the fence at the top of the cliff?
Thanks. Anything else? All right, Ilsa, do you want to share about processing and distribution?
Sure. So, yeah, I definitely come from a lens of looking at connecting local growers as well with hunger initiatives. And, but something overall that we talked about is how to build more resilient communities, and doing that by, I think that that's something that supporting more regionally grown food can help support that resilience. And we saw how those supply chains can break down with COVID-19, with public health events like COVID-19. So an opportunity that is coming up is there is federal dollars coming from the American Rescue Plan Act. And so this could be an opportunity to explore advocating for investment in statewide infrastructure, which I don't know all the rules that the state's gonna have for spending this money, but some of it could go to instituting some, maybe even like a processing facility similar to Iowa used to have Iowa Choice Harvest that was processing locally grown food and selling a lot to schools. There could be potential to talk about a shared nonprofit and for-profit space, something that could provide food for food banks or food pantries, as well as to schools or other institutions. So this could also be done in conjunction with existing food hubs that are already aggregating food from local farmers, and some of whom are already distributing food to food pantries and food banks. Was there anything else that we talked about, Luke? I can't recall. I think just generally having like better connections and connecting local food to hunger relief organizations is always a good thing.
Yeah, I think you got it all. Yeah. Well, thank you, Ilsa. Do we have anyone from the access and consumption group that is going to share?
Hello, it's Natalie. I was nominated to share what we talked about. We had a great conversation, and we were incapable to whittle things down to 2 things, but so we have 5 little succinct things. So we really talked about promoting access to healthy foods and things like formula. We talked about accessibility in terms of transportation and other barriers that folks face to get to pantries or to WIC offices. We talked about root causes like housing and wages, and also extending some of these federal goodies that we talked about earlier. You know, if we can have them during the pandemic, why can't we have them after? I haven't heard a good reason yet, other than we can't pay for it, and that's not true. So anyway, and then also just thinking about and centering racial equity in the work that we're doing and how we're thinking about you know, poverty and food access. So those are, I have more detailed notes, but those are the highlights of what we talked about. Thank you to everyone in our group. Did I miss anyone? Did I mischaracterize anything? Now is your time to to add. Cool.
All right. Thank you, Natalie. And then finally, food waste and recovery. Does someone want to share out from that?
Yeah, we designated Ezra to be our secretary. So Ezra, do you want to do a quick report out?
Yes, I can. We did I think 4 general policy areas. Number 1 was like the planning and zoning opportunities, whether that's state or within like cities and counties, and difficulties of like providing access that local growers have for like having a farm in the city, and having like, curbside fridges, things like that. Another one that was more food rescue related was having an opportunity for like an ongoing fund for purchasing of like food storage equipment, so refrigeration or vehicles, or like sharing of those resources, because that's a large barrier that pantries and like, if there's like a small pantry at a like an early childhood care center, those are like barriers they face. Like they could use more food, but they only have one fridge and they don't have the funds for a second fridge, or like a chest freezer, things like that. So there could be an ongoing fund each year available. That would be a good idea. And then another policy that was related to like food waste that we proposed was just like a nice policies that discourage food going into landfills at its most basic. So like tax breaks for like digesters, or increase the tipping fees at landfills. So there's like a disincentive to take food waste to or organic to a landfill because you're going to have to pay more, or like increase funds for recycling or recycling programs, things like that. Basically making it less easy and less cheap to just drop your organic to landfill. And then finally we had one that was kind of our larger overall, like what policy or initiatives could improve equity and access to food. And we talked about like social support policies that are tied to, that may not be like directly related to food, like to food rescue or food systems, but it's like inherently part of it. So like minimum wage and other like social support systems where like if people had more money, they could afford and buy food for themselves and their community. And it would like address other social challenges as well. So those are like our top four. Yeah, I think I covered it. Team.
Yeah, thank you very much. Ezra, can you email your notes and then I'll get them, expand them a little bit and get them to Luke?
Yep.
Put my email in the chat room.
Good.
Well, thank you, everyone. It sounds like we had some great discussions happening. And so just to explain kind of next part of the process, we'll get all these notes together. And then our new policy committee will kind of be looking at what are those top policy priorities. And our members will vote on the final legislative agenda. So if you're not a member already, encourage you to become a member. You can become a member as an individual or as an organization, and we'll explain a little bit more on that in just a little bit. But that'll be the next part of this process, is determining a final agenda and getting that approved by our members. So again, thank you all for coming with your ideas and sharing those. We really appreciate it, and we wanted this to be interactive so that everyone could provide input. So next, we're just going to share a few ways that you can stay engaged with Iowa Hunger Coalition. First, I want to encourage you all to take our post-event survey. We'll be emailing that out afterward to everyone. And Natalie, I don't know if you have that you could put that in the chat as well. But you'll also have an opportunity in that post-event survey, if you had like a really good policy idea that you just think of after this, there is a spot for you to add any of those in the post-event survey as well. Encourage you all to subscribe to our email list and like us on Facebook. If you go to our website, iowahungercoalition.org, there should be a little box that pops up that you can just type your name and email and get subscribed to our email list. And then I also wanted to share kind of something new with the Hunger Coalition, is that we've formed these 3 committees, and you do not need to be a paid member of the Hunger Coalition to get involved in any of these committees. We have a communications committee that's really going to be focusing on, how we get the word out, and kind of share our work on social media, and with our members. We have an outreach and membership group that's really focusing on how we build our membership, but also some outreach events, one of which I'll be talking about in just a second, but really trying to focus on getting more people engaged in the coalition and the work that we're doing. And then finally, a policy committee that really focuses on that legislative agenda and doing some of that direct advocacy and lobbying during this session. So if you're interested in joining any of those committees, feel free to reach out with an email, or on that post-event survey, just indicate that you're interested in joining one of these, and we'll be sure to follow up with more information. Next, John, I wanted to see if you wanted to share about this upcoming webinar that we've got planned.
For sure. Thanks, Luke. Yeah, on behalf of the Iowa Hunger Coalition, I would like to invite you all to attend our first in a series of webinars focused on creative anti-hunger solutions in Iowa. And for this first one, we are talking about Pay What You Can cafes. We have some really wonderful guest speakers who are running Pay What You Can cafes in Iowa and in the Midwest. We have somebody representing the Nest Cafe in the Quad Cities, Groundswell in Cedar Rapids, and Tricklebee Cafe in Milwaukee. And they're all kind of on different parts of their journey. So it'll be really interesting to hear from those who maybe just started one to a cafe that's been in existence for several years. So it's a really wonderful method of reducing hunger, but also building community in a really dignified way. And I'm really hoping it'll create a spark in different communities around our state to invest in these types of cafes. So encourage you all to attend, and definitely invite friends who are maybe in food business, economic development, elected officials. I think there's a lot of people who could be involved in this type of work. So please attend on Wednesday, July 14th. I think the Zoom link will be on the Iowa Hunger Coalition website and also the Facebook page. See you then.
Thanks, John. So yeah, we're
Hey, Luke, real quick
Yeah.
question for John. John, do we have a little blurb that people can put it in their social media to get the word out about the webinar?
Totally, yep. And there's a Facebook event that we've created on the Iowa Hunger Coalition page, so you can share that with your networks, and there is a blurb within that event too.
Okay.
Thanks, Dan.
Great.
All right, next, I very quickly wanted to share a new tool that we've developed that is now live on the Iowa Hunger Coalition website. So here's, hope you can all see this. If you click on this Snap Map link, this will bring up this new mapping tool. And basically this pulls stats from the Iowa's food assistance monthly reports. So SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, it's known in Iowa as food assistance, formerly known as food stamps. This just provides kind of the latest details of SNAP in the state of Iowa. So it has total individuals, households, benefits, average monthly benefit. There's a calculation on the estimated economic impact. And you can look at this for the entire state, or you can also look at specific counties. So, you know, if we just click on Scott County, this is the latest data for Scott as of April 2021. You can also select multiple counties. You know, if you've got a legislator that maybe represents a few different counties, you can select multiple counties and get that information. And, you know, we just hope that this will be a good resource for you as you're advocating with elected officials, specifically about the SNAP program. And we're going to be working on, you know, providing more updates to this. So if you have any feedback about data points that would be useful when you're talking with legislators about food insecurity or the SNAP program, please let us know. We hope that this will continue to evolve and add more features. Finally, I'm going to turn things over to Dan.
I just had a question
Oh, yeah.
about the map, Luke. Who put it together? Like, how did this come about? Like this awesome data tool?
So this is something that I've been interested in working on for a while. And so I worked with someone who is more familiar with Tableau than I am to kind of figure out how that all works. And then every month, when the latest F1 report is released, I update that into a Google Docs spreadsheet and refresh it, and it will populate. So now it's all set up that it's pretty easy to update on a monthly basis. But yeah, I worked with someone who has more knowledge of Tableau than I do to get that set up. So if you have any experience working with Tableau and would like to assist with that, please let me know, because we could definitely, I think, add some things to that map and make it an even more useful tool. All right, Dan, do you want to kind of provide an update on our membership and finances?
Hello, everyone. Dan Nicky. I am the treasurer of the IHC, so I'm going to go over some boring financials and logistics. Up on the screen is what we have in going into fiscal 22 as our membership list. We're trying to make sure this is up to date. So if you're not on that list, but you think you are a member, please drop me an email. If you want to become a member, drop me an email. My email is in the chat feature. Regarding dues, we are a voluntary organization, but we are driven to cover our expenses. All of the board members are volunteers. I will be going into our financials over the next slide. On our website, we do have suggested dues, but we don't want the dues to be a roadblock for people to join the coalition. So any kind of dues to be a member is acceptable. We have wide range of dues from individuals to larger organizations. So please consider being a paid member, but if not, participate in some of the great opportunities that Luke talked about. And again, there could be a lot of mistakes in this list. So if you see anything, please just drop me an email and we will get it up to date. That's one of the things I'd like to have a little bit better handle on going into fiscal year 22 is a up-to-date membership list. Next slide, Luke. Okay, our financials. I'm happy to report we're in pretty good shape. Fiscal year 21, we had a carryover of $2,800 from fiscal year 20. We had dues of $6,690. You can see our expenses. Our biggest expense is our lobbyists, which is one reason, which the board feels appropriate because that's one of our major things that we want to provide is a lobbyist on the Hill. You can see the great return we got from their great work by getting the tax credit. So that is our business expense. We have insurance for all the board members, which we think is appropriate. So if you decide to become a board member, please know there is insurance for liability. And then we had miscellaneous costs of $19, and mainly that covered financial transactions with credit cards. So basically that provided a net positive $3,859 for fiscal year 21. Okay, fiscal year 22 projections. We're going to have a carryover of $4,733, and we're going to have projected dues of 3,310. However, we did collect, you see the note is very important. We collected $1,850 in dues for fiscal 22 in 21. So that's part of the carryover. That's why our carryover is so large. I'm projecting expenses at $4,000. That could change. And we may have additional expenses that we didn't have in fiscal year 21. We've talked about doing some honorariums for speakers at some of the webinars, so we will incur that. I don't see any real, anything alarming that we can't cover. And at this point, I'd be happy to take any questions on financials or the membership list or dues. You guys are making this easy on me. Okay, Luke, I guess
All right.
you.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. So that's it for our annual meeting. And I just want to thank you all so much for taking the time to join us today, to talk through some of those policy priorities that we should be looking at for the coming legislative session, and for learning a little bit more about how you can get involved with the Hunger Coalition. So keep an eye out for an email follow-up from us to fill out that post-event survey. Really encourage you to get involved in one of those committees if you're interested. And again, whether you as an individual or your organization want to become members, that's really how we keep this work moving forward, is from our members. And again, don't want those dues to be a cost prohibitive barrier for anyone in joining, but just really want to encourage you to think about becoming a member of the Hunger Coalition. And our website is below here. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Our email address, I should have added here, I'll put it in the chat, is iowahungercoalition@gmail.com. So thank you all for attending, and I think we'll wrap up a little bit early.